Okay, I'm back. Now we're going to do chapters 7 through 10. We're going to finish the book today. The puppy plays Sugar, Gummy, and Lollipop. Let's find out what happens. I hope everybody's good and you're all snuggled in. Here we go. Really? Lizzie asked him. 2 pieces of pie with ice cream. I never saw anybody hover over a plate of pie a la mode the way you did this morning, hooted the woman, who Lizzie realized must be Mrs. Packer. You must have been pretty hungry. Mr. Santiago looked at his feet. What about the honor system? Lizzie put her hands on her hips and glared at him. We're not supposed to be eating sugar this weekend. Uh-oh, said Mrs. Packer. Me and my big mouth. Guess you're in trouble now. She was grinning. Mr. Santiago shrugged and held up his hands. Guilty, he said. I know it was wrong. I just couldn't resist when I smelled that pie. Lizzie took another deep sniff. It really did smell delicious, all cinnamon and brown sugary. It was hard to blame him. How about that phone call? Mr. Santiago asked Lizzie. He was obviously in a rush to change the subject. He smiled at Mrs. Packer. No more pie today, I guess. I'll just have to have a cup of coffee with no sugar. He pulled out his phone and handed it to Lizzie. Lizzie just shook her head. She wondered if she should tell on him or let him get away with it. She hated to be a tattletale, and after all, it was only pie. On the other hand, he had agreed to the no sugar weekend. The signal's a little better outside on the porch, said Mr. Santiago. Lizzie looked down at the phone in her hand. Okay, she said, I'll be right back. You won't catch me eating pie, I promise, he said. Lizzie pushed the door open and headed outside to sit in one of the rockers on the store's porch. She dialed Aunt Amanda's number. Hello? The connection was not very good. Lizzie wasn't even sure she had dialed the right number. Aunt Amanda, she asked. Lizzie, is that you? It's me, said Lizzie. Mr. Santiago said you wanted me to call you. Plist, Merkel, Zingling puppies, said Aunt Amanda. At least that was what it sounded like. The connection wasn't getting any better. Yes, puppies, said Lizzie. We have 3 of them. They're adorable. We named them Gummi, Sugar, and Lollipop. Bungie? Aunt Amanda asked. Butcher? Malaprop? Lizzie smiled. Close enough. I wish you were here to give us advice, she said. Gurgle Bigstrom? Said Aunt Amanda. Quiggle Voxen Boy? 2 boys, said Lizzie, hoping that was what her aunt was asking. 2 boys and a girl. Gord? Said Aunt Amanda. I glit muckshons. Lizzie rolled her eyes. This was ridiculous. She really couldn't understand a word Aunt Amanda was saying. I think they're only about 6 weeks old, she said, in case her aunt could hear her better than she could hear her aunt. And Miss Dobbins agrees with me that they are probably puggles. I don't think we'll find any homes for them around here, so I'm hoping to bring them back to Littleton with us. Glitch? That was the last word Aunt Amanda said before the call was dropped. Lizzie looked at the phone. There was only 1 dot, which on her mom's phone meant hardly any signal. It wasn't worth trying again, at least not right then. She went back inside and handed the phone to Mr. Santiago, who sat sipping a mug of coffee. There was no evidence of pie. Did she have any ideas, he asked. Lizzie shook her head. If she did, I couldn't hear them. The phone wasn't working so well. The connection goes up and down all the time around here, said Mrs. Packer. Depends on the time of day, the weather, and probably the position of the stars and planets or something. Try again. You might get a better signal. Maybe tomorrow, said Lizzie. She was eager to get back to the puppies. On the way home, Mr. Santiago turned to Lizzie with an embarrassed smile. So are you going to tell on me, he asked. Depends, said Lizzie, crossing her arms. On what? He asked. On whether you stop talking about taking those puppies to the local shelter, she said. They need really good homes, and it sounds like we're not going to find them around here. Mr. Santiago nodded. Fair enough, he said. I'm beginning to see that it makes sense to bring them back to Littleton with us anyway. And for my part, I promise not to sneak any more sugar. Deal, said Lizzie, as he pulled the car into the cabin's parking spot. She jumped out and started up the trail. She couldn't wait to see Lollipop, Sugar, and Gummi. She ran ahead of Mr. Santiago, leaping over roots and rocks as she galloped up the trail. But when she got to the cabin, she saw Maria sitting on the steps crying. She rushed to her friend. What's the matter? She asked. Maria choked back a sob. Lollipop is missing, she said. Missing? What are you talking about? Lizzie sat down next to Maria and put her arm around her friend. Lollipop disappeared. I've looked everywhere and I can't find her. Maria wiped her nose on her sleeve. How could that have happened? Lizzie asked. Weren't you watching them? Maria broke into loud sobs. I was. I knew you'd think it was my fault, but I promise I never took my eyes off them. We were inside the whole time, except for when I took them out to go potty, one at a time. I don't think it's your fault, Lizzie patted Maria's back. Of course I don't, but where could she have gone? That's what I can't figure out. Even Simba can't find her, and he has nosed around every inch of the cabin. He knows something's wrong, and the other two puppies won't stop crying. I think they miss their sister. Maria put her head down and wailed. Honey, what is it? Mr. Santiago, who had lagged way behind Lizzie on the path, emerged from the woods. Are you all right? He ran to the porch and put his arms around Maria. What is it? Is Mom okay? We're fine, gasped Maria through her sobs, but Lollipop is gone. Gone? Where? Mr. Santiago looked as shocked as Lizzie felt. I don't know, Maria wailed. That's why I'm trying to tell you. Okay, Mr. Santiago hugged Maria closer. Easy now. Let's go inside and talk this over calmly. She's just a little puppy. How hard can it be to find her? He helped Maria to her feet and led her into the cabin. Lizzie followed, feeling a knot in her stomach. This wasn't good. This wasn't good at all. Inside, the two boy puppies were crying, just as Maria had said. Their little yips and wails broke Lizzie's heart. They sat in their pen, huddled together for comfort. She went straight over to them and lifted them both out, hugging them to their chest. Shh, shh, she said, kissing the tops of their sweet-smelling heads. Simba paced back and forth, sniffing the floor, the couch, the wood box near the stove, the kitchen cabinets. Mrs. Santiago was bent over a trunk, rummaging through blankets and pillows. She turned when she heard them walk in. I thought she might have gotten stuck inside this somehow, but there's definitely no puppy in here. She stood up and put her hands on her head. Think, she said, if I were a puppy, where would I go? Are you sure she's inside? Mr. Santiago asked. The door wasn't open at any point, was it? Maria shook her head. No way, she said. No. Like I said, I took them each out one at a time, but I would never leave the door open, even with them in their pen. She started to cry again. Why does everybody think it's my fault? I wasn't accusing you, said her dad. Just asking. Let's all calm down and try to be logical. He thought for a moment, stroking his chin. How about if we each take a room and search as carefully as we can? Under beds, inside drawers, behind furniture. We did that already, said Maria. Mom and I did that. Let's do it again, just to be sure. Her father moved towards the front of the cabin. I'll do the kitchen, he said. Lizzie nestled the two puppies back into their pen and then patted the blanket and called to Simba. Come on, she said. Keep them company. They need you. The big dog hesitated and nosed Mrs. Santiago's hand as if to ask if it was all right. She urged him on with a pat on the head. She's right, Simba. Take care of those little boys. Simba climbed into the pen and settled himself next to the puppies. They snuggled in close and stopped crying almost immediately. Good dog, said Lizzie. She stood up and dusted off her hands. I'll check our bedroom. I'll do Mom and Dad, said Maria, and I'll do the living room. There aren't too many hiding places and I can fill them all, said Mrs. Santiago. She walked to the couch and pulled the cushions off it, patting around under each one. Lizzie took a quick look around the bedroom she shared with Maria, and then she started at one side and checked every inch of the room until she got to the other side. She lifted up bed pillows and pulled off the quilt. She looked under the beds. She opened the little closet where the Santiagos stored extra clothes for cold weather. She poked through her backpack and Maria's. She opened the drawers on the nightstands that stood next to the twin beds, even though they were too small to hide even a tiny puppy like Lollipop. No puppy. No puppy, said Mr. Santiago as he walked out of the kitchen. No puppy, said Maria and Mrs. Santiago. Maria sat down heavily on the couch and began to cry again, quietly this time. Her mom sat down next to her and patted her arm. Think, Mrs. Santiago said to herself again. She tilted her face to the ceiling. The room was so quiet that Lizzie could hear the fire in the wood stove crackling and popping. Suddenly, Mrs. Santiago stood up, a hand to her mouth. Maybe the door was open, she said. Just for a minute. when Simba and I went out to get more wood for the fire. I was outside with Gummi then, said Maria. I saw you go to the woodshed. She stood up too. And the other puppies were in their pen. I thought it was safe. Mrs. Santiago's face had turned white. If Lollipop managed to get out of the pen and then get out of the cabin, she shook her head, she could be anywhere. They all stared at one another. What do we do? Maria asked. Lizzie could see that her friend's lip was trembling, but Maria had her fists clenched and a determined look on her face. She was obviously trying hard to hold back more tears. We need a plan. Take Simba outside, said Mrs. Santiago. I'll stay with the puppies. He'll know where to look. Good idea, said Mr. Santiago. Let's go, girls. He clicked his tongue and called to Simba. Come on, big boy. We've got a job to do. Simba didn't move. He seemed to feel as if he already had a job to do, taking care of the two puppies who were left. Mom, tell him it's okay, said Maria. Mrs. Santiago went to the puppy pen and reached in to put a hand on Simba's head. It's okay, sweetie, she said. I'll be here with these guys. You go ahead and find their sister. Simba got to his feet. Gummi and Sugar started to cry again, but Mrs. Santiago scooped them up and soothed them. It's okay, little ones, she said. Simba gave the puppies one last worried look and then turned to follow Mr. Santiago and the girls outside. Where's Lollipop? Lizzie asked Simba, the same way she would ask Buddy where his favorite toy was. Buddy was always great at finding Mr. Duck or his spongy football. When she asked that, he would race around sniffing wildly until he pounced, grabbed it, and pranced back to her proudly to show off his prize. Simba stood on the porch with his nose in the air, sniffing. Lizzie saw his nostrils working as he sorted out all the scents that surrounded the cabin. She knew that his nose, any dog's nose, worked about 10,000 times better than her own. She could smell pine trees and the musty scent of wet leaves on the ground and maybe a whiff of the lake. Simba, on the other hand, could probably smell a coyote den 3 miles away, or a rabbit hopping through the forest, or even the scent of the person who had left that box full of puppies on the porch. Lizzie shuddered at the thought of coyotes. She had heard them howling at night sometimes. During other visits, Lollipop would make a perfect snack for a hungry coyote. Where is she, Simba? Lizzie asked again. Find her. Find Lollipop. Simba looked up at her and then he sniffed some more. He leapt off the porch and put his nose to the ground, snuffling harder. He ran back and forth across the grass in front of the porch, sniffing and snuffling. He stopped at one point and held his head up high as if he was listening, and then put his nose to the ground again. Suddenly his tail began to wag. He sniffed harder, then began to run in a straight line. I think he's got the scent, said Mr. Santiago. Follow him. Lizzie and Maria jumped off the porch and ran after Simba, with his nose still to the ground. He dashed behind the cabin and straight towards the woodshed. Oh, said Mr. Santiago, who had also come running. Maybe not. He's probably just following your mom's track. Simba went to the woodshed door and began to bark. He lifted a paw and scratched at the door. He barked some more, scratched some more. Then in a moment of silence, Lizzie heard it, a tiny whimper from inside the shed. She's in there, she shouted as she ran to open the door. Sure enough, the minute the door swung open, Lollipop tumbled out. She shook off and wood chips went flying. She leapt at Simba with a happy little puppy bark and thought to herself, boy, am I glad to see you, old pal. Simba sniffed her and his tail wagged mightily. Lizzie scooped her up. You naughty girl, she said as she hugged the tiny pup close. You had us so worried. Lollipop snuffled at Lizzie's cheek and gave her chin a little nibble and thought to herself, what's the problem? I'm fine. It was just a little adventure. Maria wiped tears from her eyes and reached out. Give me a turn with that scamp, she said. Lizzie handed her over and Maria nuzzled the puppy's head with her cheek. What a good boy, Simba. Mr. Santiago petted the big dog. He rumpled Simba's ears and bent down to kiss his head. What a hero. Let's go inside and get you a really good treat. And let's take you inside for a big reunion with your brothers, Maria said to Lollipop. Or better yet, I'll go get them, said Lizzie. I'm sure they're ready for a chance to come outside. I can't wait to tell your mom that we found Lollipop. She ran inside and told Mrs. Santiago the good news. Maria's mom burst out crying when she heard. What a relief, she said. I would never have forgiven myself if something happened to that sweet little puppy. It wasn't your fault, said Lizzie. Who knew that Lollipop had figured out how to climb out of the pen? She reached in for the other two puppies and held them to her chest. You're in for a happy surprise, she told them. She headed back outside and put them on the grass near Lollipop. The three puppies ran towards each other with tiny squeals of joy. Sugar pawed Lollipop's nose and thought, there you are! Gummi rolled over and licked her chin. We missed you! Lollipop pounced on top of them. Yay, we missed you too! Lizzie and Maria laughed with tears in their eyes as they watched the puppies tumble and play. How will we ever split them up? Lizzie asked. Wouldn't it be cool if we could find somebody who would take all three? She knew it wasn't likely, but still. That's not going to be easy, said Maria, who has room for 3 dogs. Just then a voice rang out from the path through the woods. Yoo-hoo! Anybody here? Boy, Mrs. Packer wasn't kidding when she said your place was back of beyond, said the red-faced woman, huffing and puffing from her trek up the trail. She stuck out a hand as she approached. Gloria, she said, came about the free puppies. Lizzie and Maria exchanged glances, then stood up and shook hands with the stranger. Did Mrs. Packer tell you about them? That's right. I'm the one who makes the pies. I just delivered some more fresh ones, blueberry, and she told me you had some pups to get rid of. She said you don't have a phone up here, so I figured I'd just come up and see. She looked down at the puppies. Well, they're just little things, aren't they? Pies? Asked Maria. They're probably only about 7 weeks old, Lizzie said in a hurry before Gloria could say more. But they all have their own personalities already, Lizzie rattled on, telling Gloria about each of the puppies. She noticed that Gloria hadn't said cute little things or adorable little things, nor did she bend down to greet the puppies. She just stood there looking at them as if she was trying to figure out what they were good for. Right away, Lizzie felt a tingle in her spine that told her that while Gloria might be a very good pie maker, she was not the right person for these pups. They needed love, and lots of it. After being taken away from their mothers so early, still the puppies did need homes. Maybe she should give Gloria a chance. Anyway, she didn't want to be rude. She squatted down and picked up Sugar and Lollipop. Maria scooped up Gummi. Are you interested in adopting one of them? Lizzie asked. Oh, we'll take all 3, I guess, Gloria said. Stan, that's my husband, wants to try to raise them for hunting rabbits. They are part beagle, right? She squinted down at the pups. They sure don't look it. Well, we think they are, Lizzie said carefully, but we're not promising anything. They just showed up on our porch. So I heard, Gloria said. So you don't really have any claim on them exactly? Well, began Lizzie. She looked at the cabin, wishing that Mr. and Mrs. Santiago would come out. Maria seemed to read her mind. I'll go get Mom and Dad, she said. She handed Gummi to Lizzie and headed inside. So your husband knows how to train dogs? Lizzie asked. 3 squirming puppies in her arms was tough to handle. She put Gummi and Sugar back down on the ground, but held on tightly to Lollipop. He tries, sighed Gloria. So far he hasn't had much luck. I swear, he's put enough money into that fancy outdoor pen and shock collars and everything. You'd think we'd have a few rabbit skins to show for it, but so far his dogs have been duds. He's hoping for better with these. Lizzie closed her eyes. Pen? Shock collars? So the dogs would live outside? She asked. She knew that plenty of people who use dogs for hunting kept them outside in big pens with high wire fences. If they were warm enough and had enough food and water, it could be all right. But she hated to think of these sweet little puppies spending their lives in a plywood house with straw for their bedding. And shock collars? She was not into that idea, not at all. Plus, Gloria went on, if it doesn't work out, we can always sell them. My cousin says city people pay big money for these so-called designer dogs. Lizzie wondered about that too. Would Gloria and her husband make sure that the pups went to good homes? I don't know if, she began, but just then the cabin door swung open. Hello there, Mr. Santiago came out of the cabin and walked over to shake hands with Gloria. I hear you're interested in the puppies. That's right, said Gloria, but this little girl doesn't seem so ready to let them go. She let out a fake-sounding jolly laugh. Well, said Mr. Santiago, who had also come outside. Mrs. Santiago, who had also come outside. It's important to us that these puppies go to a good home. Are you saying my home isn't good enough? Gloria put her hands on her hips. I guess at least one of you thought my pies were worth eating. No, 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 Mr. Santiago blushed deep red as he held up his hands. It's not that. Hello, someone called from the edge of the trail, and Lizzie turned and smiled. Aunt Amanda, she said. In the flesh. Aunt Amanda smiled back at her. I got here as quickly as I could. You haven't given any of those puppies away yet, have you? She walked straight over to Gummi and Sugar and knelt down to let them climb all over her before she even came over to hug Lizzie and take Lollipop from her arms. Lizzie glanced at Gloria. Well, no, she said, not yet. Good, because I had first dibs, right? I know you couldn't hear everything I was saying with that terrible phone connection, but I hope you understood that much. Aunt Amanda sat down on the ground with all three puppies and giggled as Sugar nibbled at her earlobe. Lollipop tried to jump onto her head, and Gummi let himself be scratched between the ears. My friend Susie does Puggle Rescue, and she's got a whole list of people waiting for puppies. She's checked them all out, and they're all wonderful owners who are dying to give a puppy a forever home. Lizzie smiled. Really? That's fantastic. 3 happy homes would be much better than being together in an outdoor pen wearing shock collars. She glanced at Gloria, shrugged, and held up her hands. Sorry, she said. I guess they're not available after all. For a second, Gloria looked like she was about to say something, maybe something angry, and then she shrugged too. Oh, well, she said. I sure wasn't looking forward to spending all that money on dog food anyway. Stan will just have to keep looking for some dogs to train. She nodded, turned, and started to leave. Thanks anyway, she called over her shoulder as she headed down the trail. And don't forget, I just dropped off some pies at the store. If you like the apple, you'll love the blueberry. As she disappeared, Lizzie let out a long breath. Phew, she said to Aunt Amanda, you got here just in time. Good thing, said Aunt Amanda. Now she held Sugar in her arms, nuzzling his little head. I can see right away that these puppies are in terrific shape. You've done a great job taking care of them. Lizzie plopped down on the ground next to her aunt and pulled Lollipop onto her lap. Maria sat down too and picked up Gummi. They grinned at each other. Thanks, Aunt Amanda, said Lizzie. Maybe she was a super fosterer after all, as long as she had help. It was a lot of work, but we all pitched in. I think this calls for a celebration, said Mrs. Santiago. Our sugar-free weekend can wait for another time. Ever since I heard the word pie, I'm having this incredible craving for a big slice. She gave her husband a teasing look. Somehow, I have a feeling you might know where to find some. Said Mr. Santiago. He looked at Lizzie, but she just held up her hands as if to say, I didn't tell. He looked back at Mrs. Santiago and nodded. Sure, I think I can round up some pie and maybe some ice cream to go with it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the car keys. I'll be back in a jiffy, he said. Lizzie and Maria sat outside with Aunt Amanda, telling her all about the puppies as the sun set and the sky grew dark. By the time the first twinkling star came out, Lizzie was ready with her wish. May these puppies have happy lives in safe and loving homes, she said. Looking up at the sky, she pulled Lollipop close. May all puppies everywhere have that. That's my only wish. Aunt Amanda put an arm around her and kissed the top of her head. That's a wonderful wish, she said. I hope it comes true. Me too, said Maria, and then she laughed. I think my wish is coming true right now. She pointed to the beam of the flashlight bobbing through the woods. Here comes Dad with the pie. Woo! Okay, you guys, I just finished the puppy play, Sugar, Gummi, and Lollipop. 3 days, whole book. Love you guys to pieces. I'll see you the next book. Bye ya.